Marina adjusted her navy blue dress for the third time, studying her reflection in the bedroom mirror. The glass showed a 35-year-old woman, successful, owner of an art studio that earned more than many law firms in the city. But in that moment, facing her reflection, she saw only the daughter who was never quite good enough. The invitation to her parents' anniversary dinner had arrived through a WhatsApp group message, that same group where her achievements were systematically ignored while her brother's business degree was still celebrated 5 years later. She picked up the carefully wrapped gift, an original painting she'd spent weeks creating, depicting the house where she'd grown up, and headed to the most expensive restaurant in town, not knowing this would be the last time she'd beg for crumbs of love. Life has these cruel ironies. The harder we try to prove our worth to those who can't see it, the more we lose ourselves. Marina was about to learn that some prisons are so comfortable we call them family, and some freedoms are so painful we call them abandonment. But between prison and freedom, there exists a moment of awakening, that precise instant when we discover that the love we beg from others is the same love we deny ourselves. This is the story of how an invisible artist discovered that the greatest work of art she could create was her own life, free from the frames others insisted on placing around her. The Palazzo restaurant exuded that atmosphere of understated luxury her family so appreciated. Egyptian linen tablecloths, genuine silver cutlery, and an almost religious silence broken only by the occasional clink of crystal glasses. Marina arrived 15 minutes early, as she always did, with the childish hope that punctuality might compensate for all the other ways she apparently failed to be the ideal daughter. The maitre d' led her to the reserved table, where she carefully placed her gift beside the white orchid arrangement. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from nervousness, but from that familiar anxiety that preceded every encounter with her family, like an animal sensing a storm long before the first thunder. Ricardo, her older brother, was the first to arrive, accompanied by Beatrice, his wife, who was perfect in their parents' eyes, a doctor, traditional family, 2 children who already played piano. Marina, he nodded. That economical greeting that said everything about the emotional distance between them. Still painting? The question carried the same condescending tone as always, as if art were an adolescent hobby she stubbornly refused to outgrow. Marina smiled, that rehearsed smile she'd learned to use as a shield. "Yes, Ricardo, I just signed a contract with a gallery in New York," she replied, knowing the information would be received with the usual enthusiasm. None. Laura, the middle sister, arrived next with her lawyer husband, both impeccable in their coordinated suits. The greetings were brief, almost ceremonial, as if they were polite strangers sharing an elevator. Marina watched as her siblings immediately began discussing investments and business expansions, forming that closed circle from which she'd always been excluded. It was fascinating, in a morbid way, how they could be at the same table and still keep her on the outside, as invisible as the waiters who moved silently through the dining room. Their parents arrived with pomp, as always. Her father, Roberto, a retired businessman who'd built a fortune in real estate, and her mother, Helena, the perfect society wife who organized charity dinners and knew every important person in the city. "My children," Helena proclaimed, embracing Ricardo first, then Laura, and finally, with notably less enthusiasm, Marina. The hug was brief, almost an obligatory gesture, like paying a bill you'd rather forget. Roberto didn't even do that, just a nod in Marina's general direction before sitting at the head of the table, his particular throne from which he ruled the family with an iron fist and a heart of ice. "So, Ricardo, tell us about the company expansion," Roberto began, his eyes gleaming with the pride Marina knew well, that sparkle that had never, in 35 years, been directed at her. While Ricardo detailed his plans to open a branch in São Paulo, Marina sipped her wine, mentally counting how many minutes would pass before anyone spoke to her. She reached 12 minutes and 43 seconds when Helena, almost as a social obligation, asked, "And you, Marina? Still living in that studio?" The way she pronounced studio made it sound like Marina lived in a slum. "Actually, I bought the entire building," Marina replied calmly. "I've transformed all 3 floors into an integrated art space. The ground floor is the gallery. The second floor has classrooms where I teach workshops, and I live on the third." For a moment, only silence answered. Then Helena cleared her throat delicately. How alternative. Ricardo, you were saying about the quarterly profits? And just like that, like a channel changed on the remote control, Marina was once again relegated to the role of an extra in her own family. Dinner proceeded with the predictability of a well-rehearsed script. Each course that arrived was an opportunity for Roberto to praise Ricardo's professional choices, Laura's elegance, the perfect grandchildren who weren't present but were constantly mentioned. Marina existed in that space like a ghost, physically present but emotionally erased from the family narrative. Between the appetizer and the main course, she allowed herself a moment of bitter reflection. How many times over the years had she secretly paid off her mother's credit card debts? How many times had she transferred money to her father's account when he, too proud to admit it, had liquidity problems after bad investments? Marina was always the dreamer of the family, Helena said suddenly, and for an instant, Marina felt a spark of hope. But then she continued, remember when she said she wanted to be a painter? Roberto and I tried so hard to set her on the right path. We offered to pay for law school, business administration, even medicine, but she was always stubborn. The table laughed. That condescending laugh reserved for the tolerated eccentricities of a problematic relative. Marina felt each laugh like a small cut, 1,000 little deaths of who she really was. Beatrice, the doctor's sister-in-law, decided to add her contribution. It's admirable to follow your passion, Marina. Not everyone needs to have a real career. The venom was wrapped in silk, but it was still venom. Marina could have responded that her studio earned twice what Beatrice's clinic did, could have mentioned the international artists who came specifically for her workshops, could have talked about the 2-year waiting list for her work, but she'd learned, through decades of failed attempts, that there was no achievement big enough to change the narrative her family had written for her. When it came time for toasts, Marina raised her glass along with the others, murmuring congratulations that sounded hollow even to her own ears. Ricardo made a speech about their parents' example of a solid marriage. Laura recited a poem she'd clearly found on the internet, and then all eyes turned to Marina. She took a deep breath, gathering the courage she'd been accumulating all evening. I made something special for you, she said, reaching for the gift she'd brought. It's an original painting. I spent weeks working on it. The silence that followed as her parents unwrapped the gift was almost palpable. When the painting was revealed, an impressive work that captured not just the physical structure of the house where they'd grown up, but also the memories, the colors of the sunsets they used to watch from the porch, the details of the garden Helena had cultivated with such care. Marina waited, her heart racing, for some reaction. Helena examined the painting as if it were a suspicious document. It's interesting, she finally said. Roberto, where do you think we can store this? Store, not hang, not display. Store, as if it were junk to be hidden in the attic. Roberto didn't even look properly at the painting. Leave it in the car later. Marina, next time, a gift card would be more practical. The comment was made casually, like discussing the weather, but the impact was devastating. Marina watched her masterpiece, because that's what it was, one of her best creations, being set aside, propped against the wall like trash awaiting collection. In that moment, something inside her broke. It wasn't dramatic. There were no tears or screams. It was silent, like the exact moment a porcelain vase develops a fatal crack. It still looks whole, but it will never be the same. Dessert arrived, profiteroles with Belgian chocolate sauce, but Marina could barely taste it. Her mind was elsewhere, reviewing the last 5 years of bank transfers, 60,000 reais. That was the total she'd secretly injected into her parents' accounts when Roberto nearly went bankrupt after investing in a pyramid scheme that he, of course, never admitted was fraudulent. She'd never said anything, never demanded recognition. She did it because, deep down, she still harbored the pathetic hope that one day they would see her value, that one day they would understand that the failed artist was actually the only one keeping them afloat. You know, Marina, Laura began, delicately wiping her lips with the linen napkin, Marcus and I are thinking about renovating the house. Do you know any good decorators? Someone with real credentials, you know? The veiled insult was clear. Marina had offered her design services several times, but Laura always found a polite excuse to decline. It was ironic considering Marina had been an art consultant for 3 of the city's most luxurious hotels, but to Laura, She would always be the weirdy sister who scribbled on canvases. The conversation shifted to Ricardo's vacation plans in Europe, and Marina found herself once again excluded from the dialogue. They discussed itineraries, hotels, Michelin-starred restaurants, never once considering including her, not even out of politeness. It was as if she were a piece of furniture in the room, necessary to complete the scene, but not worthy of actual interaction. Marina drank the last sip of her wine, feeling the weight of all the rejections accumulated over the years. Every forgotten birthday, every ignored achievement, every rejected attempt at connection, it all formed a mountain of hurt that she carried alone. It was when Helena started talking about Ricardo's youngest grandchild, a violin prodigy, only 7 years old, that Marina felt an urgent need for air. "Excuse me," she murmured, rising from the table. No one seemed to notice her departure, absorbed as they were in discussing which conservatory would be best for the little genius. In the restaurant's luxurious bathroom, Marina leaned against the marble sink and met her own eyes in the mirror. They were the eyes of a woman tired of diminishing herself to fit into spaces where she was never welcome. She took out her phone and checked her business bank account. The numbers she saw made her smile bitterly. In a good month, her studio earned more than Ricardo made in a quarter. Her works were in private collections from Sao Paulo to Paris. She had a waiting list of students wanting to learn her techniques. And yet, here she was, in an expensive restaurant bathroom, hiding from her own family like an embarrassed teenager. The contrast between her professional success and her family failure had never been so stark. When she returned to the table, she found everyone laughing at something Ricardo had said. No one noticed her absence. No one noticed her return. It was like being invisible in broad daylight. Marina sat silently, observing the family dynamics like an anthropologist studying a distant tribe. She saw how her parents lit up when Ricardo spoke, how Helena touched Laura's arm with genuine affection, how they all formed a cohesive unit from which she was perpetually excluded. And for the first time, instead of pain, she felt something different: clarity. "Marina, you're so quiet," Helena observed with that false tone of concern she used in public. "Is everything all right?" The question was rhetorical, of course. Helena didn't really want to know if everything was all right. It was just social protocol, like asking about the weather. Marina considered her options. She could do what she always did: smile, nod, murmur something about being tired. Or she could, for the first time in 35 years, tell the truth. She chose a middle path. "I'm just thinking about some decisions I need to make about the studio." "Decisions?" Roberto finally showed a glimmer of interest, probably imagining she was finally giving up this artist game and looking for a real job. "What kind of decisions?" Marina took a sip of water, savoring the moment. "I'm considering some financial changes, reorganizing priorities, cutting some unnecessary expenses." She chose her words carefully, planting seeds whose fruits they would harvest soon. Roberto nodded approvingly, not imagining that he himself was about to be categorized as unnecessary expense. The check arrived, and as always, there was that embarrassing ballet of wallets and credit cards. Roberto made the magnanimous gesture of taking the check, but Marina saw the almost imperceptible tremor in his hand when he saw the total. She knew that tremor. It was the same one from 3 months ago when she discreetly deposited 5,000 reais in his account to cover the month's expenses. Without thinking much, Marina extended her card. "Let me pay, Dad. It's my gift to you." Roberto hesitated, pride fighting against necessity, but eventually accepted with a murmur of thanks that seemed to scratch his throat. While they waited for the card to be processed, Ricardo began talking about his plans to buy a beach house. "Nothing too extravagant," he said with false modesty. "Just something simple in Trancoso." Marina almost laughed. Simple and Trancoso didn't belong in the same sentence. Laura immediately began talking about how wonderful it would be to spend holidays there, the whole family together. The whole family clearly didn't include Marina. No one even pretended to consult her about dates or preferences. It was like planning a dinner in front of someone without inviting them, a casual cruelty her family had elevated to an art form. "Remember that time we went to the beach when we were kids?" Marina tried, in one last pathetic attempt to insert herself into the conversation. "I made that sandcastle that won the local competition." The silence was deafening for a moment. Then Helena said, "Oh yes, you always liked those artistic things." The tone made it clear that artistic things was on the same level as childish things, or irrelevant things. Ricardo quickly changed the subject, returning to his real estate plans, and Marina finally understood. She could conquer the entire world, but to her family, she would always be the disappointment who chose paint over suits. It was at that moment that her phone vibrated with a message. It was James, the curator from the New York gallery. "Marina, we urgently need 3 more pieces from you. An important collector wants to do a solo exhibition. We can discuss prices, but I'm thinking around $50,000 per piece." Marina looked at the message, then at her family animatedly discussing something that didn't include her, and felt the chasm between her 2 worlds. In one, she was an internationally sought-after artist. In the other, she was the family's walking failure. The rejected painting was still propped against the wall, forgotten like Marina had always been. She observed it for a moment, seeing not just the work itself, but everything it represented, every attempt at connection, every effort to belong, every humiliation accepted in the name of a love that would never come. Helena was now showing photos of the grandchildren on her phone, Roberto and Laura leaning in to see, all forming a perfect picture of a happy family of which Marina was just a shadow in the background. "You know," Marina said suddenly, her voice cutting through the conversation like a knife, "it's funny how life works." Everyone turned to her, surprised by the interruption. "I spent years trying to make you see me, trying to prove my worth, trying to earn a place at this table that wasn't the black sheep, the failure, the weird one." Helena began to protest with a weak, "Marina, it's not like that." But Marina raised her hand. "Please, mother, let's be honest for once. You tolerate my presence, but you've never wanted it. You accept my money but never my love." "What money?" Roberto asked, his voice hardening with wounded pride. Marina laughed, a humorless sound. "The 60,000 reais over the last 5 years. The bills paid discreetly, the debts settled, Mom's credit card that magically zeroed out every month. Did you think it was a financial miracle?" The silence that followed was different from all the others that night. It was heavy, dense, loaded with unspoken truths, finally exposed. Ricardo looked genuinely shocked. Laura looked away, and her parents seemed to have aged 10 years in 10 seconds. "You're making this up," Helena stammered, but the lack of conviction in her voice was evident. Marina took out her phone and, with a few taps, showed the transfer history. Every date, every amount, every financial rescue documented in black and white. "I never said anything because I thought maybe if I helped quietly, you would eventually." She stopped, swallowing the lump in her throat. "It doesn't matter what I thought. What matters is what I know now." Roberto was red, a mixture of shame and anger coloring his face. "We never asked for your help," he said defensively. "No," Marina agreed. "You never asked. You just took, just like you took my self-esteem, my confidence, my best years trying to be something you could love." Laura finally spoke. "Marina, you're being dramatic." Marina turned to her sister with a look that could freeze hell. "Dramatic? When was the last time you called me just to talk? When was the last time any of you visited my studio? Do you know the name of any of my friends? Do you know what my favorite color is?" The silence answered for them. Marina nodded, as if confirming something to herself. "I'm leaving now, and I'm not coming back. Not to family dinners where I'm ignored, not to financially help people who can't even pretend to care about me, not to beg for crumbs of affection from those who should love me unconditionally." She stood up, took her purse, and then, in one last gesture, also took the rejected painting. "I'll take this. Someone who actually values art will appreciate it." "Marina, sit down. Let's talk about this like adults." Roberto tried to use his commanding tone, the one that worked with everyone except the new Marina being born in that moment. "No, Dad. Adult conversations require mutual respect, something that never existed here." She paused at the head of the table, looking at each of them. "You know what the saddest part is? I'm successful, ridiculously successful. I have clients waiting years for my work. I earn more in a month than many earn in a year. And you never knew because you never asked." Beatrice, always the peacemaker, tried to intervene. "Marina, family is family. You can't just..." "I can and I will. Marina cut her off. Family is who we choose to love and who chooses to love us back. You made your choice a long time ago. Today, I make mine. She started to walk away, but then stopped, remembering something. Oh, and about those financial changes I mentioned. Starting tomorrow, the bank will stop making those automatic transfers. I suggest you review your budgets. Helena stood up abruptly, panic finally breaking her society composure. Marina, you can't do this. We're your parents. Marina looked at her with a calm that came from years of pain finally acknowledged and validated. Biologically, yes. Emotionally, you abdicated that title a long time ago. Consider this my last work of art for you, the portrait of a daughter who finally learned to value herself. And with that, she left, leaving behind not just an unfinished dinner, but 35 years of failed attempts to belong to a place where she was never welcome. Outside the restaurant, the night air had never felt so clean. Marina took a deep breath, feeling as if she'd removed a weight of tons from her shoulders. Her phone began vibrating frantically. Messages from Laura, Ricardo, calls from Helena. She silenced the device without even looking. There was something liberating about not responding, not running back to appease, explain, apologize for existing. As she walked to her car, embracing the painting she'd created with so much love, Marina felt something she hadn't felt in decades: pride in herself. The next day, she woke up in her apartment on the 3rd floor of the studio, sunlight streaming through the large windows and illuminating the dozens of canvases in progress. She made her coffee in silence, savoring the peace of not having to check her phone to see what new family crisis she'd need to finance. At 9 o'clock, she called her bank manager and canceled all automatic transfers. "Are you sure, Ms. Cavalcanti?" the manager asked, surprised by the change after years of regularity. "Absolutely," she replied, and the word had never sounded so powerful. She went down to the 2nd floor, where her students were already beginning to arrive for the morning workshop. They were women of all ages, all seeking in art something Marina had finally found: freedom. "Today," she announced to the class, "we're going to talk about boundaries, not just in compositions, but in life. About when to stop adding layers to a work that's already complete. About recognizing when something can't be fixed with more paint." The students looked at each other, sensing there was something different about their teacher today, a lightness, an authenticity that made her words even more powerful. A week passed. Marina blocked her family's numbers after the 100th attempt at contact. The peace this brought was indescribable. For the first time in years, she painted for pure pleasure, not to prove anything to anyone. The work she created that week, an explosion of colors representing liberation, was immediately purchased by a collector for an amount that would make Roberto choke on his expensive cigar. But Marina felt no need to share this victory with them. Some achievements are too sweet to waste on those who don't know how to appreciate them. James, the New York curator, flew to Brazil to see her in person. "Marina, there's something different about your recent work. A strength, a raw authenticity it's transcendent." They had lunch on the studio's terrace overlooking the city, and Marina told him about her family break. James, a man who had seen artists of all kinds, held her hand across the table. The greatest artists in history created their best work after freeing themselves from the chains that bound them. Van Gogh, Frida, Basquiat, they all had to choose between approval and authenticity. You chose right. That afternoon, while organizing her studio, Marina found an old family photo, taken when she was 12, everyone smiling at the camera, the perfect picture of family happiness. But now, with adult eyes, she could see the details that escaped the child. How she was positioned slightly behind the others, how her mother's hand rested on her sibling's shoulders but not on hers, how her smile was the only one that didn't reach her eyes. She didn't tear up the photo, that would be too dramatic. She simply placed it in a drawer, along with other relics from a life that was no longer hers. 3 months passed. Marina learned through mutual acquaintances that Roberto had been forced to sell his luxury car, that Helena had canceled her annual charity party, that Ricardo was struggling to maintain appearances of success. Part of her, a small, petty part she wasn't proud to acknowledge, felt satisfaction, but mostly she felt indifference. They were strangers now, people she'd once known in another life, when she still believed family love was an obligation, not a choice. Her studio flourished like never before. Without the energy drained by family dramas, Marina had more to give to her students. Her art, her life. She started dating Miguel, a chef who owned the restaurant on the ground floor next door. Someone who saw her, really saw her, not as the failed artist or the problem daughter, but as Marina, complete and sufficient in herself. Miguel never asked about her family, instinctively sensing they were forbidden territory, and Marina loved him even more for it. One afternoon, while preparing a new exhibition, Marina received a letter. She recognized Helena's handwriting immediately. For a moment, she considered throwing it away unopened, but curiosity won. The letter was long, full of justifications, veiled accusations dressed as apologies, and, at the end, a not-so-subtle request for financial help. Marina read it all once, then lit a candle and burned the letter, watching the words turn to ash. There was no anger in the gesture, just finality. Some stories need to end for others to begin. The exhibition in New York was a resounding success. Marina flew there alone, with no one to share at the airport, no one waiting for news, and it was fine, more than fine. It was liberating. On opening night, wearing a red dress her mother would have considered too flashy, Marina circulated through the gallery, listening to important people from the art world discuss her work with reverence. "There's a brutal honesty here," a famous critic commented, as if the artist has stopped asking permission to exist. Marina smiled, because that was exactly what had happened. During the cocktail party, an elegant woman approached. "You must have a very proud family," she commented. After effusively praising one of the pieces, Marina took a sip of champagne before answering, "I have a chosen family who supports me unconditionally." It was true. Her students, Miguel, James, the other artists she'd met over the years, these were the people who celebrated her victories and supported her in defeats. Family, she'd learned, isn't about blood. It's about who shows up, who stays, who sees you when you're still learning to see yourself. That night, in her hotel room overlooking Central Park, Marina opened her laptop to find dozens of congratulatory messages. None from her biological family, of course, but that didn't hurt anymore. What hurt was having taken so long to understand that begging for love is the quickest way to lose it. Not the love of others, but self-love, which is the only one we really can't live without. She responded to each message with genuine gratitude, feeling more connected to these strangers than she'd ever felt with those who shared her DNA. 6 months after the fateful dinner, Marina received an unexpected visit at the studio. Laura appeared unannounced, looking smaller than Marina remembered, as if her sister's absence had somehow diminished her. "May I come in?" she asked, standing at the door like an uncertain saleswoman. Marina considered saying no, but curiosity won. She guided Laura through the space, watching her eyes widen at the magnitude of what Marina had built. 3 floors of pure creation, every corner breathing art and life. "I didn't know," Laura finally said, sitting on a bench in the main studio. "About all this, about your success, about the money, about how we treated you." Marina continued cleaning her brushes, letting the silence speak for her. "Mom and Dad are struggling. Ricardo, too. The house of cards collapsed without your support." Laura paused, perhaps hoping Marina would offer help. "When that didn't happen," she continued, "I came to apologize, and also to understand. How did you do it? How did you build all this while we treated you like you were invisible?" Marina finally turned to her sister, really seeing her for the first time in years. Laura looked tired, the lines around her eyes deeper, the veneer of perfection cracked. "I built this not despite you treating me as invisible, but because you treated me that way. Every rejection was a brick, every humiliation was cement. You taught me, unintentionally, that I didn't need your approval to exist. It was the most painful and most valuable lesson of my life." Laura began to cry, silent tears running down her perfectly made-up face. Marina didn't console her. Some pains need to be felt completely to be understood. "You can come back," Laura said through tears. "We can start over. Be a real family this time." Marina laughed, but there was no cruelty in the sound, just an old sadness. "Laura, you can't start over with ashes. You burned all the bridges. Not with dramatic fire, but with the ice water of indifference. Now that you need to cross to my side, you discover there's no path anymore." Laura stood to leave, defeated, but stopped at the door. "You're stronger than all of us," she admitted. "You always were." I think that's why we needed to diminish you." The confession hung in the air like an abstract work of art, beautiful in its honesty, but unable to change the past. After Laura left, Marina sat in her studio, surrounded by her creations, and for the first time she cried, not from sadness, but from relief. The recognition had arrived, too late to matter, but in time to confirm what she'd always known deep down. She was never the problem. The problem was a sick family system that needed a scapegoat to function, and she'd volunteered for too long. Miguel found her like that hours later, when he came to bring dinner as he did every Tuesday. He didn't ask about the dried tears on her face, just held her and served the food he'd prepared especially for her. As they ate in comfortable silence, Marina realized that this acceptance without judgment, this care without conditions, this was love. Not the love she'd begged for decades, but the love she'd found when she stopped looking. And it was worth infinitely more than any crumb her biological family could have offered. A year passed since that dinner. Marina was in Paris for a joint exhibition with other contemporary artists when she saw the news in the Brazilian online newspaper. Businessman Roberto Cavalcanti declares bankruptcy after failed investments. The photo showed her parents leaving the courthouse, looking much older than she remembered. For a moment, a brief moment, she considered calling, but then she remembered all the times her achievements were ignored, all the times her money was accepted without thanks, all the times she was treated like a footnote in the Cavalcanti family story. Instead, she went to the Louvre. Standing before the great masterpieces, Marina reflected on what it means to create something lasting. It's not about immediate approval or family recognition. It's about truth, authenticity, the courage to expose your soul even when no one is looking. Her family had tried to mold her into something palatable, acceptable, normal. But art isn't about normality. It's about transforming pain into beauty, rejection into revolution, invisibility into a presence impossible to ignore. That night in her hotel room, Marina wrote in her journal, "Today marks 1 year since I became an orphan by my own choice. It's strange how chosen solitude is less lonely than forced company. I've learned that family isn't about obligation, but about mutual choice. They chose not to see me. I chose to stop hiding. In the end, we both got what we always wanted. They, a family without the black sheep. I, a life without the need to bleach my wool to fit in the flock. Everyone won, even if they don't know it yet." Marina Cavalcanti is today a respected name in the international art world. Her works sell before they're even finished. Her workshops have years-long waiting lists. Her life is full of purpose and love, the love she chooses to give and receive, not what's imposed by blood ties. Sometimes, in the silent early mornings in her studio, she thinks about the family she left behind, not with anger or sadness, but with the distant compassion one has for characters in a book read long ago. You understand their motivations but no longer feel the need to be part of the story. The painting of the family home, the one rejected at dinner, now occupies a place of honor in her studio, not as a reminder of what she lost, but as a marker of the moment she chose to find herself. Visitors often ask about it, sensing there's something special about that work. "It's a house that was once mine," Marina answers simply, "but I discovered that home is where we choose to be, not where we're born by chance. And that, dear reader, is the most valuable lesson anyone can learn. The love we beg for rarely is worth the price we pay for it, but the love we build with our own hands, that is imperishable." Have you also been painting with colors others chose for you? Have you been begging for a place at tables where your seat was never really welcome? How many times have you dimmed your light so as not to outshine those who prefer darkness? Marina's story isn't unique. In every family, in every group, in every society, there's someone being invited to be less so. Others can feel like more. But here's the secret. It took me years to learn, and I share with you now. Your light doesn't diminish anyone else's. Only those who live in shadows feel threatened by the sun. If this story touched something in you, if you saw a piece of your own journey in the brushstrokes of this narrative, do something for yourself today. Not tomorrow, not after things get better, not when you have courage. Today. It can be small, saying no to a commitment that drains your energy, setting a boundary you've been postponing, or simply looking in the mirror and saying, "I am enough." Because you are. You always were. You were just waiting for permission to believe it. Consider this story your permission. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, who's stuck at a table where they're not valued, share this message. Sometimes all we need is to know we're not alone in our struggle for authenticity. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications so you don't miss the next stories of transformation and courage. Because every story I tell here is a mirror where you can see yourself, not as others see you, but as you really are, complete, valuable, deserving of unconditional love. Oh, and if you really enjoyed this story and want to support this work, help me with a coffee on Ko-fi. Your contribution, no matter how small, makes all the difference in keeping new stories like this being told.